You're watching Fox 17 News, Nashville in Focus.
Good Sunday morning, everybody. I'm Harriet Wallace, and you're watching your favorite political show in Nashville, Nashville in Focus. Also, it's cold blue today. We've got the Titans. This is the last game before the Super Bowl. I feel like we've got it. I also know that we've got an amazing group of folks with us today. Let me introduce you to them if you haven't met them already. We've got Jasper Hendricks, who is chair of the Davidson County Democratic Black Caucus. We've got Rick Williams, political strategist and the Davidson County co-chair of then-candidate Donald Trump's campaign for 2016. And then we've got new to the table. I've been trying to get her here. I'm so glad she's here. Beth Jocelyn Ross. She is vice chair of the Davidson County Democratic Party. Welcome, everybody, to the table this Sunday. And just like when you're at the table, when you're going to eat, you've got a full menu. We've got a full menu. I had to chop some things off. How many of you all like me were like, "Ooh, this is good," all week long, like all kind of nuggets just dropping? So
everything, every day, it was something.
And you were saying earlier, I told them this, I said that. Now the reports are out. So we have a couple of reports we're going to get to. The first one, let's talk about the poverty report. I did a story on it actually late last week. Metro Social Services Department presented a report to the Minority Caucus of Metro Council, 11-member committee or caucus group of all African Americans, and I believe just one Latina in that group, and said, we are in trouble. Poverty is more than a notion. It is a thing. It is a growing issue. Jasper, let me ask you first. You saw the report. Any surprises in there for you, or is it exactly what you thought it would be?
No, it's exactly where I expected it to be, and it probably could be a little bit worse than what the report is saying, because reports really don't get the full details. They get what people are willing to give them. And it's nothing new. It's what the people of Davidson County have been saying. Hey, you're overlooking us. I've been hearing that since I've been here, since, for now almost 3 years, that there are people in communities that are saying, hey, you're forgetting about us. You're bringing in all these, big companies, and we're not reaping the benefits. No benefits. You have people that are moving here for these jobs. I have friends that have moved here that have, with their jobs, that have relocated them here, and their realtors are not even showing them Davidson County.
And people have been saying that we're going to bring the companies and the jobs to Davidson, but their kids and their homes are going to be
they're in Hendersonville, they're out in Brentwood, out in Franklin, in Wilson County, in Smyrna.
Not here where it matters,
and they're not here, right?
Well, and let me give you all a couple of these statistics. Let me read over them, and then I'm going to come to this side of the table. There is a severe lack of economic mobility, saying that for those who are born in poverty, basically they have severe difficulty moving outside of poverty. Pretty low numbers. Davidson County ranks in the lowest 5%. The lowest 5% of economic mobility in the country. Another startling statistic. We rank 9th in the country, and I did a story on this specifically, 9th in the country for students living in poverty. We have chronic unemployment. An average of about 7 people are starting to move out of the city a day. A lot of the businesses are coming here, which is great, but majority of those jobs are going to people that they recruit from outside of the city. So when we bill it, they're bringing jobs. This report says we're not getting them. What is the biggest shock for either of you in this report? What does this say to you?
It says to me, I was not aware that it was this bad. Frankly, I was not aware. It does point to the lack of our public transit system here, and the fact that in the last, 8 years, under Dean and Barry and Briley, they've been cutting sometimes. Just last budget session, Briley cut back on public transit. And, again, I go back to government has some things it needs to do, and you've got to look where the people are and look who needs public transportation and do that. And I think the past 3 administrations have been too focused on big deals and big projects and have not been taking care of government functions here and not been trying to help in areas where public transit needed to be. So it's a slap in the face to Nashville. We need to wake up and try to And I hope under John Cooper he's reading this and looking at this and making plans. I know he hires somebody to work on a transit plan. And their
Came from
meetings,
Atlanta, and they would know something about transportation and transit.
And their meetings every week, and I encourage the public out there. I encourage them to get involved. Go to these meetings. Tell them what you need, and it'll be helpful because I think she's going to focus first on Davidson County and working on transit here, while the state is working on a bigger plan regionally.
I did speak with her a few weeks back, and she said that she has been meeting with those leaders in the surrounding counties, making sure that everyone is included in it, because it's more than just Davidson, especially when we see people leaving. Beth, get in on this. Poverty levels in Nashville are high and rising. We are not only breaking records in a bad way across the state, but we're competing nationally for some of the worst numbers when it comes to poverty. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it's definitely concerning for all the reasons that we've been discussing. I mean, we know that, Nashville is considered the it city, but unfortunately, it's not the it city for a lot of our population. And I think it's easy for folks who live in certain areas that are not experiencing these problems to be kind of insulated and unaware that so many people in our city are suffering, and that so many of those people suffering are children. And I think that, we can't have a conversation about this without addressing the TANF money. That
you said the word. There goes Jasper. There it is. He's been talking about it for the last, I don't know how many weeks now. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, this
point.
is a direct result of that. And so, I mean, we can talk about transportation being an issue, but where are those people going to go? Can they afford to get on the bus? And those are the things that the TANF money is supposed to be used for. It's supposed to be used for assistance to give people the job training and development that they need, the child care that they need in order to go out and look for a job and to be able to. So we can say that, okay, it's okay for you now. You can now are able to sit at the counter, but are you able to afford the meal that they're going to provide you at the counter? And so, these numbers are a direct result of that. And so it's not about cutting what the mayors have been able to cut. They're not getting the resources that they need from the state. The state was sent this money to help these specific people. That's what it's there for.
So this is the backup support funding
Yes.
for the cities. So let's talk about city funding, and we're going to get more into some of the state level activity, because we know the legislature, the General Assembly is now in session. When you look at this report, and we have just a few seconds left in this segment, is there any way to solve this without raising taxes?
We can work with, you have to work through the state legislature. We need Senator Gilmore, Representative Dixie, Representative Love, and Representative Freeman to get together, because this all impacts their districts, right? These people live in their districts. So what are they going to do to hold DHS accountable and to get some of that money that is sitting there, that $735 million plus $241 million in child care money?
That's a lot of money.
But that's supposed to be around the state. So we're just talking about Nashville, but what about Shelby County? What about
Hold on
Tipton?
just a second. We'll get into
Chattanooga.
that. We've got more, obviously, to pick up on this. Everyone, come right back after the break, because we're going to talk a little more about the money, where it goes, and what's happening at the state capitol. We'll be right back.
You're watching Fox 17 News, Nashville in Focus.
Welcome back to Nashville in Focus. Again, our hearts are with the Titans, sending all of our love out there to Kansas City, hoping that they bring home their win so we can go to, was it Miami?
Miami.
All right, okay.
Sunshine, Miami.
Yes. Come on, Titans. We're rooting for you for sure. So let's talk about another report. Again, this poverty report from the social services is on our website, fox17.com. Let's talk about another report. Jasper, you've got it in front of you. This is the audit that was done by the State Comptroller's Office of the Department of Corrections. It is a requirement of the State Comptroller's Office to conduct these audits when a department is up for renewal. And so for roughly 2 years, nearly 30 auditors combed through every process, procedure, book, everything of the, I believe it's 34 facilities across the state. Jasper, this doesn't look good, and you've been talking about that.
Yes, and I mean, but when we look at like what are the alternatives, Sheriff Hall said that it would cost him $20 million the first year, and then $16 million each year thereafter to operate, so that Davidson County, so that he can operate the jail and take it from this private company. But he would only get $18 million from the state. Based on the current for Core Civic. No, from the state to give to Sheriff Hall. Sheriff Hall, it will cost him $20 million, but he would only get $18 million in reimbursement from the state. However, Core Civic get 30 under their current contract. They would get $30 million. So he wouldn't even receive enough money to operate the jail. And so right now it's not feasible based on the way. But again, that goes back to our state legislature. They need to work on changing the way that the state reimburses, our localities, and then we wouldn't have to rely on, if he's saying he can do it for $20 million for the first year and $16 million for each year after that, why are we giving a private company $30 million a year to run the jail so that they can buy more Titan suite? Love the Titans.
Did you ever tweet out that picture? Because he actually took a picture. He's mentioned it on the show. He took a picture of the suite. But, I want to mention this report because there are 234 pages in this report. Just printed out a few of them. A number of areas where they saw that improvement was needed. Mental health, they found that mental and medical health was not provided to inmates as needed. Right. They found that rapes were under and improperly investigated, that deaths were listed as natural but ended up being murder or something different, or possibly an overdose or suicide. Just a number of errors. Beth, is it time for the state to fully take over? And if so, what would that process look like? Or do you have another alternative? What do you think is best?
I think, the idea of outsourcing, it's one of those things that sounds good on paper. It's supposed to turn the work over to professionals. It's supposed to save money. It's supposed to do all these things. But unfortunately,
make it easier.
It's supposed to make it easier. But what we see time and time again is that that's not actually what happens. That there are, like you said, that they're spending more money than the sheriff would actually spend when it comes to administering or running the jail, and that all of these issues with how inmates are treated, those are concerning, and I think that we really as a state need to rethink our approach at outsourcing, because it really doesn't seem to be working. We've seen that in schools as well, which is another conversation, of course, but I understand why people think outsourcing sounds good, but the evidence time and time again is that outsourcing is a problem.
Rick, you've talked about this a number of times when we look at, we've had some discussion, just oversight, right? Right now, in doing this, I learned, there's so much to consider, but there is no official oversight body of the Department of Corrections. You've got the governor, you've got the commissioner, you do have the corrections subcommittee, but they're more of our state lawmakers, but they're more of a legislative body, not an oversight body. Is it time to create an oversight body? And as Representative Powell, who sits on that legislative committee, said, maybe it's time for new leadership. What do you think?
Unfortunately, I'm old enough to remember in the 80s they had problems, and they created a Corrections Oversight Commission. And it became an oversight commission of corrections. And maybe it's time for that again, because I remember, I know it was in the 80s when that took place. And I think Clara DeWoda was the executive director, if I remember right. And so with these problems showing up, and when Justin Wilson, and that's who did the report, when he does a report, you can take it to the bank. It's thorough.
Yes.
And he puts nothing but fact out there. And if those are the facts, then there's some problems that need to exist. I don't know if the commissioner needs to go away, but there needs to be some oversight. And the idea of, and back on the local level, Darren Hall has built a new jail, and he sees the problem. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, he's taken a section of that jail. It's going to be a mental health part of it.
Yeah, that's correct.
And when people in custody come in, they're going to evaluate them. If this person's been there 10 times in the last year, and it's always because they're public drunk or DUI or mental health issue, then he's going to keep them out of the criminal system and try to put them over in this part to figure out what their basic core problem is that's bringing them back, because usually it's a petty theft or they stole something at Walgreens downtown or something like that.
Yeah.
And so they're coming back in the criminal system and tying up the criminal system, where we need to be trying real criminals that pulled a gun on somebody and tried to rob them, instead of somebody just doing petty theft because they're addicted to drugs or whatever, they have mental illness. So.
Yeah, but the sheriff is going to enter into an emergency contract.
Hold on just a second. I want you to take that up just after the break. We've got to go to a commercial very quickly. We're going to finish this report up and talk about some of the big bills we saw coming out from the Capitol just in its first week. We'll be right back.
You're watching Fox 17 News, Nashville in Focus.
Welcome back to Nashville in Focus. We've been talking about the State Comptroller's report done on the Department of Corrections. One thing to note is that when lawmakers received this last week, they did vote to extend the Department of Corrections for another 4 years. And they have 2 years from now to come back and show that they've made any change. 2 years is a long time, right, when lives are hanging in the balance. We're talking about things happening every day. You were talking, Jasper, about some things that Sheriff Hall is working on in Davidson County.
Yeah, so in Davidson County, Sheriff Hall is looking at emergency contract extension, and he's going to, hopefully, he'll be able to get in that contract extension some deliverables for core civic to have to do, which is focusing on the education of the inmates in there. So it's really more about rehabilitation, providing the mental health services, making sure that they're doing health education and everything, because we have a Hep C problem within the jails.
Absolutely.
But when you talk about 4 years and they have to come back in 2 years.
2 years.
This one particular issue here, after signing a $15.3 million contract, spending 3 years on development, they still have been unable to implement a system.
And that is spelled out in the report right here. That's on page, I don't have the page number. We've got the report on our website. But I do want to note that I did speak with Commissioner Tony Parker, who said that within 30 days they are required to turn in a correction plan of how they plan to address it, but don't have to answer to it until 2 years. Anybody want to take a stab at this before we kind of switch to some of our big bills?
Well, I'll just say, as we were discussing, the problems that were outlined are very serious problems internally within the facilities, but even externally. There were issues with how they're tracking parolees and people who are on probation. So that actually becomes a public safety issue as well.
Absolutely.
So to me, the idea of waiting 2 years, that's just not acceptable. This needs to be addressed right away. It's great that they're going to come up with a plan, but that plan needs to include ways to address these problems very quickly.
Yeah. All right, one more problem we could see arising is a lot of dissension within the community. We had a very controversial bill that passed last week. That is the LGBTQ bill that we saw come through related to adoption, where companies are protected if they decide not to permit adoption for LGBTQ couples. We have just a few seconds left. I want to send this question over to you, Rick, because Governor Lee, a member of your party, said that he plans to sign it without question or hesitation. I want to get your response when we come back after the break.
Okay.
For our last segment.
Wow.
So sad. All right, everyone, weigh in with us on social media, and of course, come right back. And we'll get an answer from, hashtag woke Rick in just a little bit.
I was waiting for that one.
You're watching Fox 17 News, Nashville in Focus.
Companies protected in their decision to extend adoption to LGBTQ families or not. Governor Lee saying that he's going to sign it. Rick, your position on that? What are your thoughts on that?
Personally, I support the bill because it's protecting private enterprises or private. Some of them are nonprofits. Many are nonprofits that are helping with adoptions of children, and they choose. A lot of them are Christian organizations, and they choose to have a different agreement about that lifestyle, and they don't feel like they should be forced by state law to enter into adoption agreements and place children with couples that they don't agree with. So it's just a simple protection of them. It doesn't stop that from happening from other organizations, but it does let them have the freedom. I think it just gives them the right of protection not to be sued, I think is what it did.
Well, it doesn't. Well, it's not an LGBT adoption bill. It's a license to discriminate against people, period. It doesn't say that you cannot, it's okay to discriminate against LGBT folks. It says based on your religious or moral convictions, which means that an agency can say that you as a single person is not qualified to raise a child, and therefore this child has to sit here in foster care in the system with other thousands of kids that are waiting for their forever home. It says that if a Christian organization, if a Muslim family comes to a Christian organization and they say, oh, well, we don't believe in your faith, then no, you cannot take this child. You cannot adopt this child. Again, a child that is sitting there in a system wanting to be loved and wanting a family structure. It just means that if I don't believe that a black family living over here in Bordeaux is capable of adopting a child, it says that it's okay. And what's not okay is that some of these agencies receive state and federal dollars. They receive our tax dollars. It's not okay to discriminate when you're receiving this money.
We've got 1 minute left. Beth, you've been moving around. You've been dropping the head. Go ahead and get in on that. What do you think?
Well, I'm very concerned about this bill. I think that it sets a terrible tone for the beginning of session. For that to literally be the very first piece of legislation that was passed is concerning. And, Jasper brings up a lot of good points. And what I would ask is, who gets to be the arbiter of what is and is not a reasonable faith-based argument not to adopt someone? What if it's a single mother? What if it's a Jewish family? Anybody could have religious issues with any group, any particular demographic.
It's too gray. Right. All right. Well, Unfortunately, we've got to leave it there. We had so much to cover, but this right here, go Titans. We're rooting for you. We'll see you back here tonight at 9 o'clock for our special Titans coverage. Have a good day, everybody.